Okay, folks, you knew this was coming. Let's fix the Yaira #1 live-action trailer. Yes, it is the trailer we didn't know we needed because we all needed a good laugh. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe the guy spent money on this, and apparently the guy saved money on this. Eric July keeps talking about how they made the live-action trailer for a fraction of what it would take to make the animated trailer, and boy does it show. So let's go in, and we're not going to just trash this trailer. We're not just going to turn this into trailer trash. We're actually going to be looking at this to see where the Soska sisters went wrong in various ways, and also what we could do to make this into a good trailer, because all the elements of a good trailer are here. It's just that they need to be rearranged, modified, massaged, altered a little, and you could get a good trailer out of this, but there were so many mistakes made in the making of this trailer that, well, let's just go ahead and dive in with probably what's the worst thing about the trailer, which is the opening sequence that reflects ISOM #1. This is the, of course, famous scene from ISOM #1 where Yaira drops Avery onto a taxi, although this car is definitely not a taxi. Congratulations on creating a multiverse in that respect. But all I can think of is the fact that this scene was pretty much wholly unnecessary for several reasons. For one thing, it is told from Isom's point of view and not Yaira's point of view. So Isom doesn't know anything about Yaira, so he's going to be just as much in the dark about her as we are. And so to try and he doesn't even talk about her. He talks about the fact that he's falling and he can't fly. So I don't understand why this sequence is even necessary in here. Also, if you haven't read ISOM #1, this entire scene is meaningless. You are going to wonder, well, what's with the black guy who just fell on the car? I mean, was there something supposed to be significant to that? I mean, the only thing that you're going to hear is that "don't follow me" shout at the end, which doesn't change the fact that this whole scene is about Isom and it's not about Yaira. We don't learn really anything about Yaira here, except she's willing to maybe, you don't even know that she dropped him on the car, unless you've read ISOM #1. Oh, and by the way, I know that stuntmen are professionals who get paid to do dangerous stunts like this, but I just feel bad for people who have to put their lives in danger for crap. You know, this scene did not help explain why anyone should buy Yaira #1, and that's the whole point of a trailer. And so this guy basically put his life on the line for no good reason. I mean, I hope he got paid. I hope people think he did a good job. I hope he gets more work out of this. But my God, I mean, I hope the Soska sisters and Eric July feel a little bit of responsibility that they actually endangered someone's life to make a crappy trailer. I would just cut this whole scene out altogether. This doesn't add anything. Instead, we would start with Lincoln Eusebio. Now, I'm going to go through the trailer as it is, and I'm going to point out the many things that are wrong with it, and then I will come back later and tell you here's how the trailer should have gone. So let's start from the beginning. We've got Lincoln Eusebio, who is horribly cast. This guy playing Lincoln Eusebio looks nothing like Lincoln Eusebio. I've heard the guy on the left here compare it to David Hogg, and that's not far off. Lincoln Eusebio is a huge guy. He's huge, he's burly, he's got massive upper arms. I mean, the guy on the left is a little bit on the ripped side, but you know, he's not big like Lincoln Eusebio is, and so he's a horrible fit for the role. I just can't believe they couldn't find one big white guy actor in all of Canada who could take on the Lincoln Eusebio role. How is that? Now, he's introducing Dr. Sally Rodell. Why? Why is there this fanfare performance for Dr. Sally Rodell's hiring at Projexis? She's just a consultant. She's not an actual company employee. And I've been in the corporate world for a while. I don't remember anybody ever celebrating a consultant coming on. Usually because it's kind of an insult to all the other people who are there at the office. It's like, oh, you had to go outside the business to get people who were skilled enough to do this kind of stuff, huh? So the idea that they would be celebrating or even mentioning the fact that this consultant came on board at a widespread company meeting is just weird. And the fact that she's a consultant was established in ISOM number 2. Lincoln Eusebio had made her an offer, and she says, well, of course I've considered it, but the consultant role is working out perfectly. So she's not even a Projexis employee, and yet for some reason they're celebrating her being hired on. In the corporate world, that just doesn't happen. You don't get any fanfare for hiring consultants. Now, if she actually changed her mind and accepted Lincoln Eusebio's offer, now that would be a good reason to celebrate her coming on board and to make mention of her at the next company get-together like this. But not if she's just a consultant. So she starts off, and the first thing you notice is that she's got these unearthly blue eyes, and she has an accent that is straight out of Swedish hell. How on earth are people not going to connect how she looks and how she sounds with how Yaira looks and how Yaira sounds? I mean, I know secret identities are passé for a lot of these universes, but you've got to... If she's not going to be found out right away that she's Dr. Sally Rodell and Yaira, then you've got to make it at least plausible that she would not be linked with her alter ego. And I cannot see how that's going to happen if you've got her talking in this ridiculous accent that doesn't even match any kind of Scandinavian accent that's out there. It's almost like y'all just made up vowel sounds. And then looking at those blue eyes that are unearthly, even when they're not glowing. I mean, just give her normal blue contacts. She doesn't have to look like she's about to change into a light blue Hulk. And good night. Now, she says, adapt or die. And the next thing you hear is people screaming. And the problem is that you haven't established that we're about to cut to another scene. So it sounds like it's the audience that's screaming. It's so ridiculous. I'm like, wait a minute. She says adapt or die, and then everybody's like, ah, ah. And I'm like, oh my God, did she scare them all that much? That seems like a bit much to be scared just from what she was saying. I mean, assuming that she's talking on topic with whatever their business model is, adapt or die could just be adapt or die in the corporate business world. There's no reason for people to be panicking. And it's not until you actually cut to the next scene that you realize it's just a bunch of random people running here and there and screaming. It's not the audience that projects this. It's almost like, oh, okay, it wasn't the audience, it was these people. Now, a police officer radios, secure the area until Alpha Corps can arrive. And this is followed by Yaira ducking under the police line tape. Okay, so we have a problem starting here. And the problem is not for people who haven't read ISOM number 1 in this case, because in the opening sequence, if you haven't read ISOM number 1, that opening sequence was meaningless. This particular sequence is going to acquire too much meaning if you've read ISOM number 1, because now, who is the threat in this scene? We remember from ISOM number 1 that Yaira was wearing gym clothes, and Yaira was the threat to police officers in there. So, whereas in ISOM number 1, you've got Yaira being the threat that police are trying to protect people from, why is it that we should think anything's changed here? Why shouldn't we continue to think that Yaira is the threat, especially when she's in what looks like matching gym wear? So this scene, this whole scene, and especially this particular scene, this one where you see her standing on the other side of the police tape, it only reinforces the mistaken notion that Yaira is the threat here. Because if the police officer is doing crowd control, for one thing, he should be facing the crowd and not the threat. You don't do crowd control by, talking to the crowd with your back turned to them. Now, here you've got another police officer who's looking right. That's the police officer on the right here. He's looking right at Yaira, and she's on the other side of the tape, and he completely ignores her. So why is that? Shouldn't he be directing her to get back behind the tape and then forcing her to get back behind the tape if she won't comply? That just also reinforces the idea that she is the actual threat. She's within the tape. She's separate from the civilians who are all gawking. The police officer is facing away from her doing crowd control, and all of this, and the other police officer, isn't even looking at, isn't even doing anything about her at all. All of this incorrectly tells the viewer that Yaira is the threat. The police are there to protect everybody from her. And that's just kind of ridiculous. So the police officer yells, "Alpha will be here in 5 minutes." And then Yaira inexplicably smiles at this news. What the hell is she smiling about? I mean, why would she be pleased that Alpha is not on the way, especially if she's not the threat? Is she in competition with Alpha I mean, is she planning on competing with them or making them look bad? Is she wanting to audition for Alpha Is this something that she's looking at as an opportunity when she engages whoever the threat is? Is she going to then tell Alpha "See, I wrapped this all up for you and we didn't even need you. Why don't you hire me on? I'll be one of your best recruits yet." Or is she merely happy that she's going to get into a fight without Alpha meddling? It looks like she's revving up to enjoy this. Why does she want to get involved? That is the thing that we don't understand here. If there is a threat, and if it's not her, then why does she even care? And then we have this ridiculous little scene where her superhuman strength doesn't even knock the guy off his feet. Now, all of the money that they spent on that opening sequence should have been spent on additional wire work and a little bit of special effects. In this case, they should have had some wire work so that this guy would have been like thrown to the side, as opposed to just being shoved a little. It just makes her look weak to push him, and he doesn't even fall down. He just stumbles a little. So now we cut back to Dr. Rodell saying, "I was here, I lived, I'm still here among you." Got to chop up the points on this particular scene. Now, by this point, unfortunately, we've completely forgotten whatever Dr. Rodell was saying before, so this part of her speech sounds completely disconnected from anything that came before it and anything going on now. And her speech was broken up in the wrong place earlier, too. This is not the first time that you had a section of her speech isolated that should not have been left to stand on its own. So here's her whole speech. "Adapt or die. It is the truest law of the earth. Very few things have the ability to survive the test of time. Though we may not be around to see them to their fullest fruition, what we struggle to create now will be the triumphant echoes from the past. I was here, I lived, I am still here, among you. It is that struggle that is the friction of creation. I would like to thank Mr. Eusebio for allowing me the opportunity to discover and create alongside my esteemed colleagues at Projexis." Now, aside from being just kind of a mishmash of a speech, there were certain portions that were isolated out that did not register as complete thoughts. Adapt or die. Okay, that's not the whole thought there. Adapt or die. It is the truest law of the earth. That is the complete thought, that the truest law of the earth is adapt or die. So if they really wanted to put this in a way that would have been coherent, they would the Soska sisters would have said, the truest law of the earth is adapt or die, and then cut to whatever you want to. But instead, they get it backwards and they isolate it so that it doesn't make any sense in isolation. Then, when she later says, "I was here, I lived, I'm still here, among you," that doesn't belong in isolation either. Though we may not be around to see them to their fullest fruition, what we struggle to create now will be the triumphant echoes from the past. I was here, I lived. She's talking about these triumphant echoes of the fact that they strove to create something. These living things that will outlast them are going to be the things that announce their ancestors' existence. And so this is the complete thought, and that last sentence should not have been isolated. Okay, so we jump to Stefania Martinez letting out a shout of light that extends all the way into space. Now this prompts Yaira to break both the bonds of gravity and the 180-degree rule. This was pointed out by Ethan Van Sciver on one of his trash casts, talking specifically about the Yaira trailer. And the 180-degree rule basically says that if throughout your scene you don't want to switch left and right if you have two different sides going. You want to have, if side A is on the left of the screen and side B is on the right of the screen, then you can maneuver around somewhat your camera angles, but never break 180 degrees so that side A is on the right and side B is on the left. All of this time that we've been watching the trailer, Yaira has been on the right-hand side facing whatever this threat is. And Stefania, who is the threat, is basically positioned on the left-hand side. You can see her, she's on the left facing right, whereas Yaira has been on the right facing left. But now, when we get to this flying sequence, she's turned around. And now she's being lifted up in the air, and so she's flying now, and for what reason, we don't really know, because, the girl has super speed, why not just stay on the ground? But she's going from left to right, and that breaks the 180-degree rule. Now, when she lands, she's on the proper side of the 180-degree rule again, and then she says, "Sweet dreams, child," and that ridiculous accent pronounces it "chilled," which just doesn't make any sense at all, and then she delivers a devastating punch. But Stefania is not knocked out, and an impressed Yaira tells her that the punch was meant to be a death blow, and that scares Stefania. Okay, question. Who says "sweet dreams, child" to someone you're trying to kill? You're not saying, "nighty night," whap, and then expecting the person to be dead. You're literally wanting the person to be unconscious. This is not a death blow that Yaira was trying to deliver. If it was, that's the stupidest thing to say in conjunction with a death blow. Have a nice nap. Well, what, that didn't kill you? Well, you only said I was supposed to nap. Oh, God. And then when Solari appears, it just kind of confuses things, because now Solari mentions her by name, and so I don't know if that means that he already knows her from whatever this encounter is, and I don't know if he knows her from the previous encounter in ISOM number 1, or is this before or after the encounter in ISOM number 1? Is this a prelude, or is this something that happens even later? I don't know what's going on as far as the timeline goes. So this is really confusing that he even introduced Solari in this. I wouldn't have introduced him at all. That's just bringing too many characters into the mix. Meanwhile, back at the welcome ceremony, you've got Jerry Minolfo chatting up Isom's sister, Altona Daniels, who is the chief technical officer at Projexis, about how it's weird that Lincoln Eusebio is hiring an archaeologist into what is primarily a biology firm. Now, that's supposed to set him up as kind of like a villain-type antagonist to Dr. Rodell, but that's a really flimsy excuse to make him a villain. I mean, Projexis is a biology company, and it sounds like what they're supposed to do is create new biology, kind of like there's people are trying to create new kinds of organisms using various ways of gene splicing and stuff like that. And, Minolfo might have a point in questioning the need for an archaeologist. It doesn't necessarily make sense that they would have hired her on. He's just bringing that up as a point. And yet that they're using that to paint him as a villain, and it's not villainous. It's more like somebody who sees through what a crap trailer he's in. By the way, this guy is probably the best thing about the Yaira trailer, because he has credentials out the wazoo as an actor. He has been around for a long, long time, and he does a bang-up job with what crap he's been handed. It's kind of like God, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Those were terribly acted movies, but they did the best with what they had. And I don't want to get into Star Wars here. I should probably do a sequence on all of that one of these days myself. But I just want to give a shout out to this guy. His name's Mackenzie Gray, and he does an excellent job as Jerry Minolfo. He doesn't come across as a villain at all, really. He just comes across as somebody who's confused and doesn't understand why they're there or why she's there, and that pretty much reflects the reader's or the watcher's experience, because we don't know what the hell's going on in this trailer either. And lastly, we get this nonsense where basically every main comic book reader's dick just shrivels up, because this is not sexy in the least. What the absolute fuck were the Soska sisters thinking from this particular scene? Winter is here, and then she does this flex that we really just don't want to see on a woman, guys. I mean, come on. This is not sexy to us. Yeah, you're trying to attract comic book readers, and comic book readers have fantasies that do not involve muscular women like this. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, even if Gal Gadot was doing, is that how you pronounce her name, or is it Gal Gadot? I never remember that. Even if the woman playing Wonder Woman were to do this, it would not be sexy. And she's freaking hot, all right? This is a male type pose, and you just don't do this for a woman and expect to actually attract readers. Spend some money instead on a green screen flying scene, for fuck's sake, or have her kick up some snow. I mean, have her demonstrate some of Yaira's other powers in this after credit sequence, because this just doesn't do it. All right, so how do we go about fixing this? Now, we have all the ingredients we need in order to make a good trailer. They just need to be assembled in the right order and tweaked here and there. So I'm going to take you through what my version of a Yaira #1 trailer should have been. And we'll start off with the Rippaverse logo. Fade in with the Rippaverse logo, fade out. And then fade in with a properly cast Lincoln Eusebio. I want to see a guy who looks just as big as Lincoln Eusebio does in the comics. Introducing archaeologist Dr. Sally Rodell. And now we fade out. And we fade in with the Twisted Twins logo, and then we fade out. Fade in with Dr. Rodell, who has a normal accent and a normal eye color, okay? She's not going to be so far out of the ordinary that we're looking at her like, where the hell is she from? And she'll be saying, the truest law of the earth is adapt or die. Now cut to Stefania Martinez collapsing on the pavement as Dr. Rodell continues in voiceover. Many believe excepts are humanity's newest adaptation to the many threats that beset us. Now cut back to Dr. Rodell and she says, but humanity must also adapt to these excepts, or else. And now we have Stefania releasing her scream, and here we cut to a scene of Dr. Rodell. She's out jogging, and she sees that scream soaring out into the outer atmosphere. Cut to the police officer yelling, Alpha Corps will be here in 5 minutes, while Dr. Rodell is safely behind the police tape with the other civilians, okay? She's not standing out at the crowd at this point. With a concerned look, she's not smiling, she's not happy about this. She mutters, we don't have 5 minutes. And that gives us a sense of urgency to the trailer, and she dips under the police tape, tossing the police officer out of her way, and the wire work will send him flying. Now Yaira uses her super speed to quickly get in front of Stefania and saying, I'm sorry, child. Yaira delivers Stefania a devastating punch, and the camera tilts, showing that Stefania has been knocked to the ground, and you cut to black. And you figure, okay, she's just been, knocked out or worse. So fade into the finish of Dr. Rodell's speech, where she says, I would like to thank Mr. Eusebio for allowing me the opportunity to discover and create solutions to the except problem alongside my esteemed colleagues at Projexis, and clapping and such ensues. So I want to give her, kind of clue in what her role there at Projexis is going to be. The excepts can be looked at in one of two ways. They can be looked at as a blessing, they can be looked at as a curse. And so for people who think of excepts as a curse, like maybe she does, like maybe Lincoln's Eusebio does, they are going to have to find ways to figure out how to control the excepts or how to eliminate the excepts even. So that kind of puts Projexis and even Yaira herself in kind of a negative light as far as her role goes. And it makes you wonder, okay, if she's supposed to be a hero, does that mean she's going to be sabotaging the company's efforts to control excepts or eliminate excepts? How exactly is this all working? And we already know that Lincoln Eusebio is a little bit on the heroic side himself, and that he's against people like Darren Fontano from ISOM #2. But we're not quite sure what it is that this whole Projexis project and all that is going to be, and that gives us some uncertainty about the future in the Rippaverse. Now, here's where we get Jerry Manolfo in here. As Dr. Rodell accepts her congratulations from Lincoln Eusebio, Jerry Manolfo mutters to Altona Daniels, this is intolerable. How can Lincoln take funds that should be going to our departments and spend them on an archaeologist. Now, Altona, as opposed to like being completely on Rodell's side here, I'd like her to actually be a little bit more sympathetic to him. You know, it's going to take money away from her department too. So, not being unsympathetic with Monalfo's views, Altona replies, I know, but Lincoln thinks that to solve for the future, we can't ignore the perspective of the past. And then, as Altona leaves Monalfo to deliver Dr. Rodell her congratulations, Monalfo mutters to himself, maybe, maybe not, before going up to congratulate Dr. Rodell himself. I misspelled that word over there, oh well. Cut back to Stefania at this point. So this is basically saying that Yaira, who has this perspective of the past, and she's bringing that to the table, he's basically doubting whether or not her perspective is going to be of any value. And as if to confirm that, we come to this scene where Stefania's accept problem, quote unquote, has decidedly not been solved. Nice punch, Stefania says, wiping the blood off of her mouth. My turn. And then Yaira is nonplussed. It's like, uh-oh, I thought I was going to put this person out for the count. And then we cut to a scene of Yaira talking with an aged friend who says, you may be older than I am, Yaira, older than anyone on this earth, but you still don't know everything. And then cut back to Stefania, who lets loose with another cosmic scream. And that's when we cut to black and we fade in the title card, Yaira. And now we have the credits roll and the after credits scene. Yaira floats down gently into view, and then abruptly steps toward the camera and thrusts out her arms, sending a blizzard toward the camera that ices up the lens, providing the background against which the Yaira #1 comics and merchandise can be displayed. And scene. Oh, but one more thing, ma'am. Yeah, I had to do the Columbo thing because I realized there's still a problem even with what I was talking about, and it has to do with the fact that this is actually all reflected in the comics as far as the confrontation between Yaira and Stefania. If you look at this, you've got, oh my god, she's even breaking the 180-degree rule here. Oh, that's so bad. Anyway, yeah, oh wow. I didn't even notice the 180-degree rule breakage there, but yeah, it's there. So we've got Yaira approaching Stefania and flying and then diving in to deliver that punch, and then she picks her up again, and then Stefania's like saying something that, you know, has Yaira let go of her, and then it looks like she's charging up for another scream or something like that. Okay, so all of this, sad to say, all of the trailer stuff that we saw from the Yaira live-action trailer is actually going to be reflected in the comic book. And the Soska sisters essentially wrote both things. And the live-action thing is just a little bit askew from that. But there's a problem when you're doing these trailers, and I've mentioned it before in my video on the ISOM #2 trailer and how it may have violated the Rippaverse ethic. You've got this Rippaverse code of ethics here that says that the stories, such as Yaira #1, the books happened. There will be no lazy time travel to change history or events. There will be no cheap multiverses that have altered versions of the same character. And this concept will remain true regardless of the medium. If the characters appear in officialized animation or live action, which is what this trailer is, the depictions need to be as accurate to the characters as realistically possible. And this is an official live-action trailer, so it means it should be governed by the rules of the Rippaverse ethic. But there is something where the rules get broken. Look at this particular scene where we look at Stefania's face after she's been punched by Yaira, and there is no blood anywhere on her face. She's fine. Now, look at her in the video. She's got blood all over her face. That speaks to there being two different power levels of these characters. You've got the comic book Stefania, who can take a punch from Yaira and be fine. And then you've got the video Stefania, who is of a much lower power level, in that when she takes a punch from Yaira, she's practically spitting teeth out. That's not the same character. These are two different versions of the same character. And once that happens, you've got a multiverse! That's right. The Yaira and the Yaira #1 live-action trailer, not the same things, guys. You've got a multiverse on your hands. And there goes the Rippaverse ethic. Now, all you really have to do in order to fix this, of course, is to go back and digitally remove the blood. You know, she took a punch, she may be hurt a little bit, but she's not bleeding, you know, and she's not injured in any discernible way. And that way, you will have parity again between the video version, the live-action version of Stefania, and the comic book version of Stefania. And then you'll have a universe again, and the Rippaverse ethic will be stitched back up. So, had to draw attention to that because every aspect of this Yaira #1 trailer really needs to be fixed. You have to pay attention to details like that if you're going to make promises about multiverses, etc., and not violate those promises with your other ventures. So that is basically how I would fix the Yaira #1 trailer. And the sad thing is that it's too late to fix anything. They've already come out with the trailer. They're already going to be coming out with the comic book, assuming the comic book is going to print already. We don't actually know that. Who knows if it's still in work, actually, from things that I've been hearing with other people, but I have no evidence to support that. All I know is that I have a lot lower hopes for Yaira #1 than I did before. The fact that the Soska sisters made this dog's breakfast of a live-action trailer and fed it to us as if it was the regurgitated vomit. God, bad enough that they made this trailer, but we also got treated to the making of video, which was just like, sure, you know, don't just feed us the sausage, show us how the sausage was made, why don't you? And now I don't have that same kind of confidence that I had that was really lifted from their previous work for Marvel. Some people have suggested that maybe it was really the editors that made their stories at Marvel really good, and who knows, it may actually be true. I'm not saying that Yaira #1 can't be good. In fact, maybe it's going to be the best of the Rippaverse titles so far, but wow, the fact that in the editing room they did not see all of these problems with their trailer and not try to assemble a story that was closer fitting to the comic and also just more impressive overall really makes me despair over what the quality of the Yaira #1 comic book is going to be. I'm really not looking forward to the experience now. And it doesn't help that, you know, I saw panel breaks in that art sampling that we just saw over there. I'm going to have plenty of reasons to complain about that book. So, anyway, thank you very much for watching. I am Mike Partika, and I hope you enjoyed this look at the Yaira #1 trailer. I hope you were able to see things from this presentation that you weren't able to get in just really all of the videos that have been going on about that. I've tried to get this one out as early as I could. And hopefully it was a worthwhile venture for, not just for me, because I enjoyed doing it, but also for you. I hope you enjoyed watching it. So thanks again. Please do subscribe if you haven't already to get notified of my next videos, and I will talk to you later.